Top Gear, a show that since 2002 has dominated British culture, especially between 2006 and 2014. Within this time frame, the show went from 2 million viewers a week to nearly 10 million. Alongside this insane growth, there was the introduction of specials, where the trio of Clarkson, Hammond and May would try and buy a car or vehicle for cheap and drive it over vast distances to see who had bought the best car. They went from the savannas of Africa to the rainforests of South America and the deserts of the Middle East. Seeing as it is Christmas and many of the specials came out around the same time as the birth of the baby Jesus, I decided to do my own special by rating all the specials of Top Gear from 2002 to 2015, that series, starting from the first one in 2007. I will rate the specials in 5 different areas, and all out of 10. Premise, humour, memorability, hosting and production will be judged, with the hosting judging basically how good the trio were and the production being how good the visuals were and like the editing and everything. Remember, this is my opinion and I fully encourage you to go and watch all the specials yourself. The US special would see the presenters travel from Miami, Florida all the way to New Orleans. They'd have to buy cars for less than $1,000 to see if it was cheaper and better to buy a car than rent on a holiday. Clarkson would buy a Chevy Camaro, May would buy a Cadillac Brougham, I think that's what it's called, and Hammond would embrace his Americanness and buy a Dodge pickup truck. Along the way, the presenters had to rag the cars around the track, test the brakes, and had to try and restart May's car with jumper leads. This would follow the presenters as their cars would break down, parts would fail, and watch them tie cows to Clarkson's roof. All the chaos of this special came to a head at a petrol station in Alabama, where the presenters had to write slogans on their cars. These slogans were meant to be offensive. This included endorsing Hillary Clinton, gay pride slogan, and saying that NASCAR sucked. All things that pissed off people down in the south at the time. This would see them be chased out of said petrol station. They would then arrive in New Orleans, and after seeing the destruction caused by Hurricane Katrina, they donated their cars to the public to support those who were affected. Here's my ratings of this special. 6 months after the US special, the Polar special would see the trio attempt to race to the North Pole from Resolute in Canada and see Clarkson and May in a Toyota Hilux, whilst Hammond would travel on a traditional dog sled. The teams would have to deal with polar bears, ice fields with ice shards that were priced as being the height of cathedrals, and snow that could quite easily trap them. There was not that much happening, as it was very repetitive, as it was basically them just driving there, but it is very interesting to watch, as the presenters basically vlog themselves 10 years before it became widespread on YouTube. It shows their struggles and successes, and it's very good to see who the presenters actually are, because they're quite personal and emotional in it. It's also the first major TV programme to use HD cameras for a long form film. I'll not spoil much, as it is really worth a watch. Here's my ratings of this special. Top Gear would then move to the opposite climate as it went to Botswana. The presenters had £1,500 to buy cars, but with one major twist. That's to get 2-wheel drive cars, seeing as they would have to travel across sub-Saharan Africa and the Makadi salt flats. This would see the trio having to modify their cars. Clarkson bought a Lancia Beta Coupe, which was the definition of unreliable, as anything that could break, broke. May bought a Mercedes 230e, as there was many Mercedes in Africa at the time, and Hammond bought an Opel Kadett, which he named Oliver. The trio would head towards the Makadi salt flats and then would have to lighten the cars out to make them not break through the salt. May and Clarkson ripped everything out, whereas Hammond decided that Oliver was too precious to alter. Once they made it across the salt flats, they had to make it through the savannah to reach the border with Namibia. The Lancia broke down about 5 times on the last day, and in the end, Hammond took Oliver home with him, which he still has to this day. Here's my ratings of this special. Top Gear would then move to Vietnam, and the presenters would be given 15 million Vietnamese dong, which sounds like a lot of money, but it was $1,000 at the time of recording. As cars were extremely expensive, the presenters decided to buy bikes instead. Hammond bought a Minsk, May bought a Honda Super Cub, and Clarkson hated bikes with a passion and bought a Vespa, which would happily throw him into a ditch as its front wheel was closer to a spinning top than the actual wheel itself. The goal of the special was to travel across Vietnam in the span of 8 days, due to the Americans trying and failing to in 10 years. The trio would head into the mountains of mainland Vietnam after setting off from Ho Chi Minh, and then they would move towards the South China Sea, which they'll drive along, making a stop to get new clothes. They then realised that they had wasted a day, so took the train up to Hanoi and then to Halong. Along the way, they started a tradition of buying gifts for each other, which were often oversized and designed to be wanted by the presenters, but awkward to carry along with them. Once in Halong, they changed their bikes to be boats and took them throughout Halong Bay to find a bar. This special would show off some of the greatest scenery in TV history and show off a place that was still struggling with the aftermath of one of the most infamous conflicts ever. Here's my ratings of this special. Top Gear would move back to the Americas for the next special, but rather than the deep south, it was the deep depths of the Amazon rainforest in Bolivia. The trio would have to work out how to bring 4x4s off of a ship, and this would then see Clarkson's genius shine. Well, he did ram May Suzuki into a log. Clarkson took a Range Rover, May took a Suzuki Jimny, and Hammond a Toyota Land Cruiser that struggled to even function. All the cars were less than £3,500 and these budget 4x4s were used to try and escape from the jungle, cutting through the undergrowth before the presenters found themselves heading to La Paz on a mountain road that has a sheer wall on one side and 1,000-foot drop down the other. The road was wide enough for 1 3/4 cars to fit through, made of gravel, and this had cars coming both ways. Not very good. There were constant rock slides and any traffic was a risk of death. But somehow all three presenters made it through. Once past Death Road, as it is fittingly nicknamed, the trio would try and move their way over an active volcano, but the altitude meant that the cars and the presenters had to stop and breathe. They made their way down the mountain and headed to Chile, and had one obstacle left, a sand dune with an incline of a few hundred feet at minimum. The Land Cruiser was a problem child the whole way, and on top of the dune, the handbrake failed, leading the car to plunge and roll. The Range Rover and the Suzuki made it, and they completed the task. Here's my ratings of this special. Top Gear would then travel to the Middle East for the next special. The trio would be tasked with buying a convertible for less than £3,500. Clarkson bought a Mazda MX-5, May bought a BMW Z3 for more than the budget intended, and Hammond bought a Fiat Bruschetta. They had to retrace the path of the original three wise men, who in the Bible would deliver gifts to infant Jesus. They had started a journey to the country of Israel, and this would see the trio drive through Turkey, Syria and Jordan to reach Bethlehem. In Syria, they would modify their cars to travel through the desert. This would also see James May fall and hit his head on a rock, leaving him to have to go to hospital. On the way, the trio had to battle with injury, fatigue and illness, and they would make their way to Israel and then visit the Sea of Galilee, where Clarkson began to think he was Jesus. They'll pick up 3 gifts, and in the middle of the night they'll go and visit a stable where in a little crib there was a baby Stig. Here's my ratings of this special. Top Gear would then go and visit India in order to try and improve Anglo-Indian relations. This saw the trio buy 3 cars that represent Britain, so Hammond bought a Mini Cooper, May a Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow and Clarkson a Jaguar XJS. The trio would start in Mumbai where they had to deliver midday food faster than Dabbawalas, but failed. From there they took a train and attempted to advertise, but failed. Whilst on the train they decided to hold a party in Delhi where some of the elite would attend. But this would fail due to a poor attempt at a party and shenanigans with fireworks. In Jaipur, a race was attempted but was ruined after Clarkson decided to win rather than be diplomatic. This led the presenters into the mountains to further advertise, but the cars had to be modified to make it to the finish line, where the cars were put on pedestals in front of the Himalayas. Here's my ratings of this special. Top Gear would then return to Africa so they could produce the Africa special, where the trio were tasked to buy an estate car for less than £1,500, and with the car they would have to find the source of the Nile. Clarkson would buy a BMW 520i Touring, James would buy a Volvo 850R and Hammond would buy a Subaru Impreza WRX. They would begin in Uganda and head into the city of Kampala, the capital, where they'd get stuck in traffic for hours. Once they got out, they'd leave and head to the town of Jezza, which is also Clarkson's nickname. They would then leave Jezza and head on some roads next to some tea plantations, where they would stay the night in a hotel, which was so bad that they decided to turn their cars into mobile hotels. They would continue their search and it would take them onto a road that was basically entirely mud, and it was so thick that May and Clarkson got stuck. The trio would then continue their journey and they'd have to build a ferry to get across the river before taking a road that caused multiple punctures as they got closer to the source of the Nile. The trio would then embark on a race to the source, a great ending to such an adventure. Here's my ratings of this special. They once again decided to revisit Asia for the Burma special in the country of Myanmar to buy lorries to travel across the country. They would start in Yangon before heading north to the border of Thailand. Along the way, the trio would travel through mountain roads, across high passes, and across the entire country until they reached the border of Thailand, where they would have to build a bridge to cross the river. They would build a bridge across the river in a sort of homage to a bridge on the River Kwai, and they'll cross the lorries across the bridge, and that was pretty much the special. Here's my ratings of this special. The Patagonia special would be the last the trio would make on Top Gear and would see the trio head to Argentina to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the V8 engine. Clarkson would buy a Porsche 928 and it would give one of the most emotional moments in Top Gear history as he told the story of the 928 allowing him to see his father one last time before he died. May would take a Lotus Esprit and Hammond and Mustang. Along the way they would visit Butch Cassidy's house, would adventure along the Andes Mountains and head into a swamp where Hammond and Clarkson would get stuck, so May had to rescue them. From there the trio would continue to head south where they would end up in a field and would start racing until the cars would begin to fall apart. That's to try and find a way out, and they got horses. The horses would throw James off and he would break a hip. It didn't matter though because all three would continue south towards the town of Ushuaia where there was a lot of anti-British sentiment due to the Falklands War. This was only made worse by Clarkson's Porsche having a number plate that read H982FKL, which looks like a reference to the Falklands War, and this annoyed a lot of people. This would cause the trio to be chased out along with the production team. Luckily no one was seriously injured. Here's my ratings of this special. Thank you so much for watching. You may have noticed it is December 25th unless you live in Australia, so this makes it my Christmas special. If you have enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. If not, please tell me why in the comments below and what to improve on. And yeah, happy holidays.